You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. Dave Sanderson is our guest today. And that's a name you may recognize not only because he's a nationally known leadership speaker and an accomplished author, but you may most know him as being the last passenger to depart flight US Airways 1549. Well, that's the flight that was the miracle on the Hudson. On January 15th, 2009, Dave survived what should have been a tragedy, emerging from the icy Hudson River alive and forever changed. Today, he travels the globe sharing lessons on leadership, faith, preparation, and purpose. Today, Dave Sanderson shares what it means to face fear head-on, how the decisions we make in uncertain moments define who we become, and why the meaning we attach to adversity shapes the rest of our lives. From the deafening silence after the engines fail, can you imagine being on a plane and then you hear no noise anymore? To the prayer he whispered as the plane descended, to the choice to turn back and help others instead of racing out to safety himself. Dave opens up about leadership under pressure, faith when the outcome is unknown, and the quiet courage required to do the right thing when it matters most. My friends, if you are walking through uncertainty, stress, or a moment that feels heavier than you expected, this conversation today is for you. You'll leave reminded that preparation builds confidence, that every setback carries the seed of purpose, and that even your hardest moments can shape you into who you're meant to become. My friends, please adjust your seat forward. Make sure the seat table is up and in its upright position. Make sure that your seatbelt is buckled in place because my friend today is going to remind us that we are ready to lift off in life. You're going to love him. His name is Dave Sanderson. Dave, welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary.
John, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be with you today.
Well, man, it is our honor, and as folks get to hear a little bit more about your story and an inflection point that changed your life, and now that moment is changing our lives, they're going to be wowed that you took the time to be with us. So thank you for that. But when you introduce yourself to maybe a person you bump into at a grocery store, so your cart's smashed, you apologize, you extend your right hand, shake theirs, and say, "My name's Dave." In one sentence, what do you say about yourself?
I'm just an ordinary guy who got put in an extraordinary situation and blessed to be able to share that story.
What is the extraordinary situation you got put in?
The extraordinary situation was that I was involved in the last passenger off the plane crash known as Miracle on the Hudson, depicted in the movie Sully on January 15, 2009, the one that actually still, John, I don't even know this, is actually still the most tweeted event in history.
Wow. Well, most tragedies end with smoke and devastation and tears. This tragedy ended in people on a wing eventually being evac'd and tears of celebration. It was such a blessed moment of tragedy redeemed. So I want to talk about that. I really do want to talk about your part within it because it's significant, and I think it's somewhat understated to a degree. And today we celebrate this, and we celebrate Sully and all those who got on the wing with you and launched into life afterwards. I want to hear about your journey before January 15th. So I've heard you in the past talk a lot about your mom.
Mm-hmm.
She sounds like a remarkable lady. Would you just talk about growing up with your mom?
Yeah, thank you. When you're growing up with your mom, you really don't think much about it, right? You're going through life, but then when you realize when you're out that your mom and dad, but more specifically for us, mom had a major impact. She was a spiritual lady. She did not go to college, and she was born to be a mother. I think that was her gift to be a mother. And I think you got to put things in perspective. She grew up in a depression, so they lived on limited means to try to get through. So her mindset was always thrift, save and be thriftful, but she always had principles too. And she made us live up to our principles. I think the greatest gift my mother gave me, and probably my sister and brother, I'm not going to talk for them, but I bet you they would say the same thing, is my mom made me make decisions with consequences when I was a kid. Mm. And I think that's one of the things that I wish I and hopefully my wife would have done better with our children is help them make decisions. Because I think too often we make our decisions for our kids. So when they get in that tough situation, they don't know how to make a decision. So I think that was, I look back and my mom taught me a lot of things, but being able to step up and make a decision and live with that consequence, good or bad, right? Because that's, you never 100%, right? I mean, heck, you get in the Hall of Fame in baseball with 300 batting average, right? So, but I think that was the greatest gift my mother ever gave me.
As you were growing up, what did you imagine doing in your life?
I had two objectives, either be a Major League Baseball player or be an astronaut. I mean, I grew up in the 60s where space was the coolest thing around. I don't know if you grew up in a place where my mom had these little books every year, and you write, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an astronaut, because I thought it was the coolest thing out there. And then when I knew I wasn't going to be an astronaut, I was like, okay, I want to be a baseball player. And neither one, unfortunately, worked out for me.
What team would you have played with?
Cincinnati Reds.
The Reds, huh?
I know you're in St. Louis, and the Cardinals are one of the Reds' biggest adversaries, but yeah, I love the Reds.
So you want to be an astronaut, but John Glenn took that position, and you want to be a Cincinnati Red Stocking, but unfortunately Barry Larkin took that position. So then what do you stumble into?
I stumbled into actually hotel restaurant management. I was an international business major in college. And so my focus was to get international, be like a James Bond, right? Travel the world and be that kind of guy. I realized I really didn't have the understanding of what that really meant. My dad gave me 30 days to get out of the house after I graduated from college and get a job. And I did not have a job or out of his house in 30 days. So I tell people, my dad helped me get my first job, because I think one of the greatest gifts my dad gave me was he'd be a man of your word.
Wow.
And he's like, you're out in 30 days. I didn't have a job. He could help me get a job. It was with Howard Johnson, hotel restaurants I knew nothing about, but I was out of his house and he lived up to his commitment. I lived up to my commitment.
You go into sales after that. What kind of sales were you doing, and what were you learning about life in that process?
Yeah, the first sales position I had was selling copiers up and down the street here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had a van and a copier. I think one of the greatest lessons I learned out of that is how to handle rejection. Because I mean, you're just constantly getting beat up, right? But you learn how to interact with people, right? And you learn that there's certain ways to helpfully not only influence, but help them understand that you're there to help them. So I was selling copiers until I got my first break in technology. And that was with a company by the name of ADP, and selling payroll and tax services. And I knew nothing about that, but I quickly learned and became a top producer for ADP.
You eventually bump into and then elevate a man named Tony Robbins. Who is Tony Robbins, and what was that relationship like?
Yeah, one of the greatest gifts my mentor Bill gave me is, and one of the first things he told me is, you got to invest in yourself. I was in the sales role, right, with copiers. They give you sales training, but that's actually product training. They don't teach you how to sell and interact with people. He encouraged me to go see people like Tom Hopkins and Jim Rohn and Dennis Waitley, and then all of a sudden I stumbled on this Tony Robbins.
Probably they don't know who you're even talking about right now. These are the icons of the 70s and 80s and 90s.
These are the rock stars back in the 80s and early 90s. And Tony Robbins was just coming up at that point. He's about 11 months older than me, so we're about the same age. So I actually signed up to go to this event in San Diego because I said, what's this guy got? He's only maybe about a year older than me. What's he doing that I'm not doing? And that was the first thing. I went to a seminar out in San Diego. It was like 300 of us for 4 days. My wife thought I was crazy. I'm spending $4,500 for what? To jump up and down and do this and that, right? But I came back and all of a sudden I was, a top producer, and I lost some weight, and it's like I was making some money. So she's like, okay, well, so I needed more. So Tony, unfortunately for me, I went back and I started volunteering for Tony's events because I couldn't afford all these events. Yeah, I had 2 kids, right? We have college educations coming up. I had sales, my sales role, but I'd volunteer so I could at least be around the energy.
Mm.
And then, a couple of years later, I think it was like 1996 or 1995, somewhere in that area, his wife was in a situation where I helped his wife. And she said, you handle that pretty well. Would you like to be on the security team? I'm like, hell, it's a lot better than handing out brochures. So she put me in the green room, which meant, all I did was sit there to make sure no one got in the door. But I tell kids, this is one of the biggest lessons in life. If you want to accelerate, is proximity is power.
Amen.
You're around a master and you get to see it. You see the energy and how they work and move. So I had proximity. He just still didn't know me too much. And then he put me on stage left and then stage right, then the assistant head and then head of security. So I had proximity for 15, 16 years with a master.
Before 2009, how
Yep.
did you handle stress?
Not well. I would basically blow up a lot myself out here in my office where I'm at right now. I would not do it in front of the family, but I would, I asked bad questions of myself, and I gave myself non-empowering things. So I didn't handle stress well. So what I would do is I would eat or shut down, and that doesn't help your health. I had to go back and start doing my Tony Robbins stuff, try to get myself back. So I learned over the years how to handle stress in a more effective manner, which helped me on January 15, 2009.
Before that date, with the help of your buddy Tony Robbins, you drafted years earlier a mission statement.
I did.
Do you remember what it said?
I, Dave Sanderson, see, hear, feel, and know the purpose of my life is to be happy, realizing I can accomplish anything I desire when I have faith in my Creator, inspiring others to be the same. I wrote that on October 24th, 1994.
And on October 25th, did you believe those words?
No, but I was empowered. I was like, okay, I've got a mission statement now, but how do you do it? See, that's a bad question. It's like, how do you do it? Why do you do it?
Right? Tell me what the difference is.
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, especially being an entrepreneur, is we try to figure out how we're going to get something done instead of asking a better question, who can help me get something done?
Right.
That was the shift for me. Once I started asking that question, who, not how, can I get something done? Then all of a sudden I was getting around people who could help me do that.
And there are moments in life that are obviously massive inflection points. And the odd thing about almost all of them is you rarely see it coming until it's already happening. It's just crazy. So January 15th, 2009, what do you remember about that morning?
We started our day early because we were in a 3-day business trip in Brooklyn, New York. We were working in a distribution center. And I tell people, I don't know if you've ever been or worked in a distribution center, but they open up early because the trucks have to start running early in the morning. So we were there to do systems checks and understand the system. So because we were designing a new system for them. So we got in there very early so we could see when the trucks hit and all the things were happening. So we got done at 10 o'clock, which is very rare. I'm like, man, this is a Thursday, 10 o'clock. I get to go home early. Yay team, right? And so I gave up a first class seat I had already scheduled because I had status. So I had all the miles. So I always got first class for seat 15A on flight 1549 on January 15th.
So you fly quite a bit. And I don't remember my seat number on any flight, and I don't remember the flight number on any flight. And yet you gave me your seat number and flight number on January 15th.
Yep.
So this must be a significant flight for you. And I think today, as we step into it for us, you board the plane, you walk past first class and all those snobs up there. You make your way back to 15A. I think that's a window seat.
Yep. That's right.
Take us forward from there. What do you remember about this, about security and about the safety briefing?
Yeah. So, when I went through first class, that was actually the first time, John, I sort of looked at like, you know what? It takes a lot of effort to get in first class, right? I mean, you got to fly a lot or pay a lot of money.
You either pay for it or you earn it, and either way, it's expensive.
It's expensive. I never thought about it to that day. It's like, you know what? It's like, been pretty blessed to be up there, but I'm back at 15A, did not pay attention to the flight crew, did not read the brochure, did not know where the exits were. So, I did exactly what I did every single time because you know what, John? I knew everything, right? And so, I just had my head buried in a magazine and didn't pay attention. And so I think, and that's most people that I'm around on a plane, that's exactly what they do. Their heads are down doing whatever they're doing instead of paying attention.
So if you travel enough, you have experiences when you're flying that you recognize, well, that shouldn't have happened, but very rarely is it catastrophic. So you might lose an engine and that's bad, but it's not catastrophic.
Right.
what you're about to experience is not just bad, it is indeed catastrophic. So you're elevating in this plane. It's relatively early morning. You're leaving New York behind. You're heading home. This is all very good news. What happens?
Yeah, nothing unusual about the takeoff. I mean, just to give you a point of perspective, LaGuardia's runways basically jut out into the bay, and then the normal flight patterns, they head north before they make their turns. No big deal, all good. Until about 60 seconds after we took off is when you hear an explosion. And it was a loud explosion, so it caught my attention. Because I mean, I wasn't paying attention, so I looked up, I looked out the window, I saw fire coming out on the left wing. Because, but like you said, planes lose engines. I know that because I've been on planes that lose engines. So, all right, all this means is I'm not getting home early. that's all that means, right? Until you realize, very shortly later that both engines were hit simultaneously. So he has no power at all, none.
When I'm really tired, I don't sleep well on planes, but when I finally put the work down or the book away or the notebook back into the bag, there's this beautiful humming noise about a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even recognize it because it's like you're swimming in it the entire time, so you don't even hear it.
That's
But I
right.
wonder what it's like to not hear it when you should. What's that moment like when you recognize that beautiful vacuum humming engine noise is completely absent of this flight?
It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. That's something I never had even recognized on a plane. I mean, well, yeah, like you said, there's always some kind of noise on a plane, right? Somewhere, whether it's engines or something's happening. But when you have dead silence, I mean, you hear nothing. You're like, and the guy next to me elbowed me and said, "Hey, man, what's going on?" I said, "I think we're going back to the airport." Yeah, I thought, because he was banking. So, okay, he's going back to the airport. But that was the moment I started to think something that's not right, because as he was banking, John, the one thing in the movie Sully, it actually in the opening scene, not to that extent, but we were underneath the highest buildings, right? We were underneath the highest building. So as we were banking, I was looking out to Manhattan. We were below the skyline.
Yeah.
I've never seen this before, right? That's And then you all of a sudden started coming back around. It's like you see this bridge coming up. You're going straight towards this bridge. You're like, I've never seen that before, right? And it's so quiet. No one's talking. I mean, you hear nothing until the captain says his famous words, "This is your captain, brace for impact." And that's the moment you realize something's going to happen, and it probably is not going to work out too well for me.
So I love my bride, and every time we fly, and if there's any kind of thing that's a little bit odd, I get a squeeze on my right arm, and then I hear the words, "Is that okay? Was that
Yeah.
supposed to happen?" And I think the people 2 rows in front of me and 3 rows behind me hear those words too, So there's that noise. When we collectively hear the words "brace for impact," what was the sound among your passengers like?
Yeah, that was the moment. Then you actually heard some things. Number one, the flight attendant said, "Brace, brace, brace." I heard that, right? But then you start hearing people getting on their cell phones. You can actually, because, let's go back to 2009. People actually had this thing called a BlackBerry, right? I had a BlackBerry. People were texting, so you could hear the texting going on. So that's where those kind of noises were going on. But you heard brace, 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 people talk on the cell phone and texting. For me, I didn't do any of that. I just started praying. I started praying.
So before that moment, I think this is important to acknowledge because we just email our way through lives. You know, I have a feeling though they weren't returning business emails saying the printers are going to be late. But I'll get back to you if I survive this thing. When you put yourself in the position of others who were texting, what types of messages from your fellow passengers do you believe they were sending out?
Oh, I've talked to several of them. Whether they were calling or texting, it was like, "Let you know I'm going down to plane. I love you," kind of thing. I think everybody at that moment, as we're going straight nose into the Hudson River, thought the same thing. This is it, game over. And you're 60 seconds away from something, and you have no control over it.
When you were praying, who were you praying to, and what were you asking or hoping for?
Well, the first thing I did is I prayed to God to forgive my sins. I didn't want anything between me and God, man. I mean, now's the time to make sure you're checked in, right? You don't want anything to mess that up at this point. I prayed to the last person I spoke with, who was my client from Brooklyn, to call my wife and just remind her that I loved her. And the third thing is I prayed that we just get whoever that dude was up front, just get me down. Just get me down, right? And that was the three things I prayed for. I mean, I remember distinctively. I mean, it's amazing, as you mentioned, when you go through a significant or defining moment, you remember the details
Yeah.
so amazingly. I mean, amazing. And now people say, "Well, how do you remember?" It's like, because they're ingrained in your body, right? I mean, it's never going to leave you, that moment.
What were you hearing around you? And I don't know if your eyes were shut or open, but if they were open, what were you seeing?
I shut my eyes after I prayed and put my head down because hey, listen, like I told you, I didn't pay attention. I didn't know how to brace, right? They have that little brochure that shows you how to brace, right? I didn't know how to brace. I was like figure out where am I gonna put my head, right? And my eyes were like focused down, right? I kept looking out the window a little bit, seeing this thing going down and the water getting closer, right? It's like, and then all of a sudden, right before impact, I closed my eyes. Said, okay, God, just hope my wife pays off the mortgage. Let's go. You know,
When you said that, were you resigned to dying?
I was ready. I was mentally ready that I wasn't coming back. At that point in time, I never saw a successful plane ditching, landing, crashing in water ever. Because the only thing that I ever saw in that was, I don't know if you've ever seen these videos of this plane, when these planes go down, one wing's little motion
Yes,
starts
like
toppling,
somersault.
right? And that's all I could fix. Like, you know what? This is it. This is it. Game over. And I said, I hope my wife pays off the mortgage. That's all I said, because I left a lot of money for her, right? So she could do that. And I promised her dad, I said, if I leave before she leaves, make sure this happens.
So the mortgage is paid off, you assume, as you get ready to impact.
Yeah.
Take us through the moment where it goes from total silence and people praying
Yep.
and texting into the first sound of impact.
The impact is extremely loud and extremely hard. He estimates he hit between 110 and 120 miles an hour. And he hit backside perfectly. He had to. Backside first, front side, and then he skidded. And people said, why he skid? Well, he actually landed on some ice. He broke the ice up.
Wow.
When he hit, he was like skidding across the broken ice, right? And all of a sudden, about 100 yards plus or minus, and people estimate, I don't know. All of a sudden, it stops. And then it's so quiet again. And all of a sudden, you're hearing, leave, 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 go, 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 right? And that's when things started happening.
For our 3 listeners and viewers who have not yet seen the movie or heard this story in the past, how close were you guys to hitting that bridge?
Yep. So here's the logistics. The George Washington Bridge is 600 feet up. The plane was roughly 1,000 feet and declining. We cleared the bridge by roughly 400 feet. And to the point, and people say, well, that's a lot of space. Well, I looked out the window and you can see people's faces looking up at you. So you're close. I tell people he doesn't get enough credit for that maneuver. I tell him he never hear about that maneuver. I think that was the maneuver right there, because that thing's going down, right? So he had to keep the speed up, and I heard him explain it. But the glided, he had to actually lift it back up to get it over the bridge, which means he lost speed, which means he had to put the nose back down to get speed again. So he did a masterful job, and I tell people he doesn't get enough credit for that one maneuver.
Listen, they made a movie about his life, and yet he does not get anywhere near enough credit for any of this. Had he waited 8 more seconds before making that bank, you and I are not having this conversation.
No. Yeah, he had 4 options, right? He had 4 options, and that's what I tell people about decision making and how important it is in leadership. You have to be able to make a decision. And his first option, as you mentioned, he could go into the ocean right there. He was over the ocean, right? Could get in the ocean, get down, no one there to save you. Plus, it's pretty rough water. Second option was Teterboro. Teterboro was right there, but Teterboro, as in Manhattan, have big, tall buildings. What happens if he clips a building? Not a good option. Third option, right, was LaGuardia, as they showed in the movie, right? Getting it back to the airport. As it was shown, not a good shot. Maybe, but not a good shot. Fourth option was the river, right? So in a matter of seconds, I tell people, he had to go through choice, no, yes, let's go, right? And I tell people that's part of leadership. I love, we have to make in our life, make calls. And most people are afraid to make a call, right?
Did you know that you were going down in the water?
Once he crossed the bridge, I knew. As soon as he crossed the bridge, I knew.
So you mentioned earlier that there was silence for a moment. The plane stopped moving, then silence, and then you heard kind of, all right, here we go. So then where are we going? What happens then once the plane is in the water?
So in the plane, you heard go, go, go. I give the people on the 2 doors credit for getting those out, because those are 42-pound doors with water pressure after a plane crash.
Yeah.
So I give these 2 guys, I know the 2 guys, I give them both credit. So the doors are getting out, right? And water's rushing in quickly. Where I was sitting, water was already about knee level deep immediately. This is 36-degree water, right? So it's flooding in. In the back had more, in the front they had less, because the plane was actually like this. It wasn't flat. It was
Yeah.
like this. So people are moving, and so I'm moving too because when we were going down, I grew up playing sports, and we always had game plans. And my game plan said, if I survive this thing, I better figure out a game plan. My game plan was aisle up out. So in my mind, I kept saying aisle up out, aisle up out, aisle up out. If I survived, I knew what I was going to do. Because one thing I learned by being with Tony so long is you say things enough, it gets ingrained in you, right?
Yeah.
So I could react. I didn't have to think, I could react. So, all right, we're down. I look out, water's in my going in, people are going out, aisle up out, right? So I got to the aisle, right? All right, step one's done, right? We're about anywhere from like knee to waist deep water in the aisle. All right, next is get to the aisle, get up. So I started going up, and all of a sudden, that's when everything changed for me. That was the moment that not only day changed, but maybe my entire direction. Because when I started going up the aisle, first thing I heard, the first was my mother start talking to me. My mom, like I mentioned, passed away in 1997, but she would tell me something, and I know she told my brother and sister the same thing, but I'll just comment about myself. I heard her say in my head, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And like I told you earlier, I think one of the greatest gifts my mother gave me is the ability to make a decision, what's consequence. And she didn't say do the right thing. If you do the right thing, God will take care of you. You still got to make the choice. What's the right thing for you? Now, the right thing still could have been going up and going out. Could have been. But I grew up in a small town outside of Cincinnati where everybody knew everybody and everybody cared about each other. Everybody knew everybody's name. So instead of going up and out, I climbed over the seats to go towards the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help. Because one thing I knew at that point, I was certain at that point, I was alive. I didn't know anybody in the back was alive because that's where we hit. So I went towards the back and things were moving. I mean, now because the water's chest level deep. People are moving, but it's now, the term I used with Katie Couric that night on CBS was, it's controlled chaos.
Yeah.
Where no one's losing it, but you're rolling, right? So I got behind the last person, John. And so now we're in the back of the plane behind the last person. And put things in perspective. This is roughly 3:30, 3:31 in the afternoon in the middle of the winter in New York, which means what? It's getting dark, right? And I tell people, one of the things I've told US Airways, they tell you to look, when you're going out, look, there's lights on the floor. You can't see lights underwater.
Interesting.
So it was dark and luggage is floating around now because of the impact. The bins are broken open. So you got luggage floating in the water, right? And I just got behind the last person. I'm making my way up. And I don't see any lights. So I see on the right, I see a 10F. Like, dude, I'm out of here, right? Time to go. I've done everything I can possibly do, right? So I'm getting out like everybody else. And I started to look out, and that wing was already filled up. I looked at the boat. The boat was already filled up. There's no room. So that's why I was inside the plane waist deep in 36-degree water for over 7 minutes. That's how it happened.
Did you see Captain Sully at all during this time?
No, I'm sure. I know he was walking back and forth. I didn't know who it was. I didn't care. I was like looking outward because part of this time I was actually holding on to the lifeboat, and the reason why is, and I tell people, I don't know if you know anything about the Hudson River. I've learned a lot about it over the last several years. It's got extremely fast current. That plane actually was floating down the river about a half a mile in 24 minutes. So as that plane was floating down the river, that lifeboat was floating out into the river, and they, like I and like you, opened up with us. Who reads the instructions? Who pays attention? It's actually tethered to the plane, but no one knew that, so they kept yelling, "Hold on, hold on, hold on!" So the first picture when I was on Good Morning America they showed was me holding onto the lifeboat, waist deep in 36-degree water. That's how I knew I was found out I was the last passenger out.
Oh man! So tell us what happens from there.
So, things are happening all over the place. I was in there approximately 7 minutes, and, there was a lady on the wing and she wasn't moving. And, I tell people, you don't know how people are going to react, right? You just don't know. And some people react quickly. Some people go into shock, right? And I would hallucinate. I'm not speaking for her, but she wasn't moving. So I hallucinated. She didn't know what to do. And when you're in a situation like this, you have to keep moving. Right? There's no time to wait around and wait for someone to tell you what to do, right? You have to take action. So I just started yelling at this lady, and I got her attention, and somebody helped her to get on the lifeboat. And all of a sudden, you see people walking down a wing. And from my perspective, looking out, it looked like people were walking on water. I mean, it was amazing. Like people were walking on water. Like, whoa. But I'm still in the plane. And then a couple of minutes later, I felt the plane shift. And what I found out later is one of the boats was part of the rescue, a tugboat. As he was backing out, he hit the front of the plane. He hit the front of the plane, shook the plane, water goes up my back. And the first thing I thought was Titanic. Because only thing I could reference to that was when that boat tipped up in Titanic.
Yeah.
What did it do? It sucked everything with it. And I said, don't be sucked down in the plane, man. And that's the moment I had to jump in and swim for my life.
What's it like to be in 39-degree water?
People have a hard time understanding.
And by the way, I have a
Yeah.
pool in my backyard and I swim in trunks.
Yeah.
And it's still not always easy. One time, though, just to be goofy, I jumped in with my blue jeans on, tennis shoes on, shirt on, just to make the kids laugh. And dude,
Yep.
like I barely stayed up. Like it was not easy to swim at all.
That's why I tell people, I was fully clothed, right? 36-degree water. And the one point that everybody misses, there's jet fuel in the water. So that's why I'm wearing glasses. Because when I was swimming and I got out and, in the hospital, they were trying to clean my eyes and all the things they do. I was still having a little haze in my eyes because there's a picture of me, I'm looking like, I could barely see. So when I got back, the optometrist checked it out and found these black spots throughout my eyes. And they think they got jet fuel in my eyes. But like you said, you're swimming in 36-degree water after a plane crash fully clothed. It's not easy. But thank God my mom and dad made me learn how to swim. I'm a real passionate. That's why I swim now with Navy SEALs and Special Ops. And to help, not only to help them raise money, but show people this is a skill you have to have. It's not a should. You must have this skill because you never know when you're going to be faced being in water, and you got to be able to stay above water. Fortunately for me, I had that skill set. I wasn't a good swimmer, but enough skill to get to the end of the wing.
When did you finally get pulled into a boat and tell me about that experience?
Yeah, I got to the end of the wing and I'm holding on to the wing, bobbing up and down the water and yelling, climb, climb, climb. And I yelled, can't, right? And then I heard my mom again because the word my mom hated most of life was can't. And her thing was, I figured out later, much later, that my mother's worldview after all these years was if you can't, you must. She would not let her kids say the word. We never said the word can't in my house. Never. So I got one arm up, somebody grabbed it, got the other arm up, somebody grabbed it. I do not know who these two gentlemen are to this day, but they pulled me on one of the ferries. That's how I got onto the ferry.
Man, you're looking out at a boat that 11 minutes earlier, essentially, you are leaving LaGuardia and heading home. And now you're soaking wet, out of breath, dizzy, can't really see. It's all foggy. When do you reach out to your family at home?
It wasn't until much later because I lost everything in the plane. I was one of the few people that didn't figure out to carry your BlackBerry with you, right? Because I had it packed away. So I didn't get a chance to talk to my wife until 11:30, 12 o'clock that night because I was in the hospital. I had hypothermia. I was on every media show in the world that night, right? And finally, US Airways sent my liaison, my person. Each one of us got our own person. Mine was Doreen out of Pittsburgh. So she flew in from Pittsburgh, and her job was to take care of me, right? Whatever Dave wanted. So when she got there about 10:30, 11 o'clock that night, I hadn't talked to my wife. So I asked her if I could use her phone. And she let me use her phone. And that's when I finally had a chance to talk to my wife and find out what was going on the home front.
Dude, tell me about that conversation.
Well, she was just, she was like, are you okay? Do I need to come up there? I'm like, I'm in the hospital. They're taking care of me and don't come up because I'm going to go home tomorrow. I was more concerned about what's going on at home because she's now home with 4 kids by herself. And her story is as amazing as my story. I mean, she was actually taking our son to basketball practice while all this stuff was going down. That's what moms do, right? They take kids to all these things. So when she found out, my daughter's the one who got the message I was in the plane crash. Wow. My wife, when she got home, and she had 2 kids in the house, 1 kid in the car, and the other one, she's trying to get figured out how to get picked up. ABC, CBS, and NBC were already in our yard, ready to interview her.
Wow.
And before she could even get in the house to figure out what was going on, right? All she heard is, Dad's been in a plane crash. That's all she heard.
Did she know that Dad survived the plane crash, or was she unsure?
She knew that I survived because she heard my voice that night with Katie Couric.
Oh man, I mean, it's all so intense. And you hear from a bunch of folks that expect depression, expect sadness, expect regrets, expect a heaviness. And yet that's not something that you ultimately ended up dealing with.
Yeah, I think all the training that I had and the opportunity to learn how to manage my mind. I mean, one of the first things Tony Robbins teaches how to manage your state, right? So I had that training and I had that skill set. So I knew I had to reframe it. And where it really came to me was a few weeks later when I was on Good Morning America with some of the other passengers and crew. And as you know, you've been on the media, they have a green room, right? They hold you in the green room and all this happy stuff, right? So we're talking, and one of the passengers got a little, let's say, upset, say it that way, okay? And I'm sitting here thinking, what's wrong with this guy? I mean, we survived the plane crash and we're on national TV.
Yeah.
I mean, but so I judged him pretty quick, and that's one of the biggest. I guess I tell you the biggest lessons I learned out of this is not to judge people quickly, because I did not know what he was going through. I found out later he was going through a divorce and he just lost his job. So, what the meaning he attached to the plane crash was devastation. The meaning I attached, it was a blessing because it gave me an opportunity to serve. Same situation, two totally different paths in our lives.
Maybe that explains what I was going to ask you about next, which was you were invited to speak at a little prayer pancake breakfast. And I think many of us would have said, bro, it's a little too soon for me to be eating pancakes talking about this near-death experience. But you said yes.
Yeah, I went to church that Sunday and everybody wanted to talk to me, right? I mean, my wife's like looking around, everybody's come up rubbing my head and hugging me and all this. She's like, so the gentleman who's in charge of men's breakfast came up and asked me if I'd speak the next week. And, of course I want to do it for you, right? I mean, it's our church, right? What are you going to say no to God, right? It's like, come on, right? So I said yes, but I had prepared nothing, right? So, I didn't know they advertised it all over Charlotte, and 400 or 500 people show up to this thing. Instead of 40 old guys eating pancakes, we got 400 or 500 people, and they run out of pancakes, and people are upset. And I don't know what I'm doing now, man. So I go out behind, and they put it in our gym. And I don't know if you have seen a gym at a church, but it's a gym, and you have a stage. I go behind the stage, and behind the curtain, and I said, God, give me something to say, man. Just give it to me, right? I just give me something to say. So I spoke, right? I didn't know what I said that day, John. I have no clue. I get done speaking, and everyone wanted to talk to me, but there's two men who really wanted to talk to me. One was from Bank of America, and one was from Wachovia. They have people on the plane with me. So I was like, okay, I'm not talking to them. But then I look up, I look in the back of the room. I see this older lady staring at me. So vision is end of a gym, right? So I'm one end of the gym, she's at the other end. I look up and she's like looking, and all of a sudden she catches my eye, starts walking all the way around over here on my left. Comes in and grabs my left arm really hard. I'm like, I'm jumping. I mean, we're a week after a plane crash. And I've been being pulled and tugged every which way, and people grab you, right? You're like, whoa. But then she looked me in the eye and said something that only changed that day, but changed probably the entire direction. She said, I was questioning if there is a God, and I don't believe in miracles. But you are physical evidence that there is a God, and he does miracles. Thank you. Thank you. She let my arm go, looked me in the eye one more time, walked away, no big deal. These two men start bawling in front of me. I mean, physically crying, right? And I don't know what's going on now. Like looking around, my minister was actually behind me witnessing this whole thing. He witnessed the entire thing, right? Yeah. I'm looking back at him. I'm like, well, what's going on here? I'm not getting it, right? But then I realized something. What happened to me on January 15, 2009, how it impacted somebody. Before she goes to her great beyond, wherever that is, now believes there is a God who does miracles because I am physical evidence. And that was the moment I realized I had to do this. I have a bigger message than just surviving a plane crash. I impacted somebody's life, and she was 80, 90 years old. I don't know how old she was. It's an older lady, right? I don't know. She's probably not even around anymore. But now at least she went to her deathbed knowing there's a God because of me. So that's why I do what I do.
When you speak, because you've been doing this now for 15 years, what's the message you hope people take away from your presentations?
Yeah, it depends on the audience, of course. If it's a business audience, I sort of talk more about the lessons and strategies that we had to use that day that could also impact business. But I also want people to say is, faith is sort of the central theme of this. Because what is faith? Faith is believing in something unseen, right? So you got to have faith in yourself that when things get tough, there's something bigger out there that can help you get through it. And that's sort of the overlying thing, but I really don't talk about it directly. I more talk about, how do you bounce back? How do you lead in uncertain times? Because this whole world's uncertain right now. How do you step up and do it? How do you change the meaning you're attaching to something so you can have an empowering meaning instead of a disempowering meaning?
Yeah.
Those are kinds of things I really talk about depending on the audience.
So I've heard very clearly how it changes now what you do with your life. How has it changed the way you experience life?
Oh, it's been dramatic because, we talked about when we opened up, the stress would hit me a little bit. I would get a little bit jumpy, a little bit. Now it's like, you sort of realize, you know what? We have a sort of theme on my little company. If no one died and when no one's bleeding, we'll get through it, right? And that's sort of the theme.
It's a
And
good day, man. No one died. No one's bleeding. Let's go home.
my EA is the one that came up with it. I said, Kelly, that was brilliant. That's exactly right. Because you sort of figure out, all right, take a few minutes, let it roll off your back, right? And let's figure this out. Because I believe one of my core beliefs is if I can find a strategy, I can do anything. So all I look for is how to find a strategy, and then I teach the strategy to other people. So, that's what I've learned is that these great leaders, what they do great is learn strategies and how to use them and then help other people use them likewise.
So I'm going to ask you about 3 quotes that I wrote down from stuff you've written
Okay.
or talks you've given. 3 quotes.
Please.
Here we go. Number 1, the meaning you attach to something produces the emotion of your life.
And emotion is your life. That is correct. Whatever meaning you attach is the emotion you're going to live in. Some people, like I mentioned, that gentleman attached that meaning to the plane situation was devastation. His life was gone. It's done. Right. So that's how he was living. And he lived that through anger, right? Getting it out. And so you can change a meaning. You can reframe meanings and you just ask yourself a different question. First, put yourself in the right state of mind, right? Through either your physiology, the questions you ask, your focus, and then ask yourself a different, more empowering question. That's how you reframe a meaning.
Give me an example of that. You've been doing this for a long time. You've been modeling it as a leader, but you've also been teaching it as a guide. Give me an example of one person who was struggling with something and you helped them by asking a different question or attaching a different meaning to it to pivot the way they viewed it and then to completely reshape their life afterwards.
Thank you for asking me that. I'll tell you a quick one. So I was actually coming back from a speaking engagement from the Golden Isles of Georgia. I was driving on I-95. Now, have you ever been on I-95? It's a parking lot, right?
It's a packed house.
So, I had like a 5-hour drive going, and I just didn't park. I get a phone call from a friend from Tony Robbins' world and asked me, he said, listen, I need your help. I said, of course, because I got a friend who's locked herself in a cabin in Northern Ontario. She survived an avalanche, and she won't come out. She won't talk to anybody. She's a friend. Can you help her? I'm like, I don't know anything about avalanches, right? She goes, but you survived a plane crash. I said, yeah. Can you at least talk to her? I said, okay. So I said, set it up the next couple of days. So I get on the call with him and her. She's locked down. She doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want anybody's help. She doesn't want to come out of the cabin. And I'm like, what I realized is she was having survivor guilt. That was the meaning she attached. What I found out is there's only 4 people who survived that avalanche. She was one of the 4. Everybody else died. So the question she kept asking herself was, why me? Why me? So I shared the story, what happened to me. And about 5 weeks after the miracle on the Hudson, I don't remember this, the plane crashed in Buffalo.
Yes.
That little community. Well, I had a client from Charlotte on that plane and who I was working with. And now all of a sudden I've got a friend, or not a friend, but a business acquaintance who's died. So I get, at that time, John, anytime there was a transportation incident, I was getting a phone call to talk about it.
Yes.
So I get a phone call and about doing this interview for a TV station in Montreal. Now, Montreal's pretty close to Buffalo, right? It's up in that area. So, sure. And one of the first questions he asked me was, why do you think all those people died, but you didn't? And I was like shocked. I didn't know what to say. And all of a sudden, all I said was, it just wasn't my time. It just wasn't my time. And I told her that story, but she was still pretty locked down. I told her, your time wasn't there, right? So I said, okay. I said, give me a couple of days. Let me figure something out. So I make a couple phone calls through my connections. And through about, I think, 4 phone calls, we find this kid in Liberia. All right. And he's one of the happiest people in the world. And what does he do all day, John? He gets up, he gets water, he brings it back. He's happy. So I asked him, I said, would you be open to be on a call with me and all these people to talk to this young lady? Of course, right? We'd love to, happy, right? So we get on this phone call and he talks about his day. And basically the message was, you don't have to have a reason to be happy. And she's like, started to think about this. And at the end of the call, I says, you know what? I said, I don't know why you survived. I survived, but you have a bigger calling now. You have a reason. You can talk to people who are going through the same thing you are. And that's the thing. After he talked to her and then I closed up with that, she started getting out more and more often. So that was a situation where I had to change the meaning. Her meaning was, I have no reason to live because these other people didn't live. Instead of, I have a new calling.
I've also heard you say that every adversity has a benefit.
Most definitely.
That one's hard to hear. Tell us why you believe that.
I believe that because, I think everybody faces adversity, but, to give you a very personal example, last Thursday, we lost a family member to lung cancer. And I didn't have time to respond. I didn't know enough to respond, and it affected our family immediately. But when I starting to sort of rationalize is that had to happen for a reason and a purpose. And one of the reasons and purpose is I'm going to turn that adversity into something I can do for cancer people. So, I think in every adversity, there's an opportunity to be able to serve something or somebody. And it all starts with gratitude. And the first couple of days, we were a mess, right? We were a mess. But then I started thinking about gratitude. It's like, you know what? I'm so grateful to have her in my life. She was here for her life. And it's not my plan. See, I tell people, this is not your plan where the challenges you've gone through, John, the challenges I've gone through. It's not our plan. It's God's plan. So if you look at it, it's not your plan. So now you're disassociated from it, right? And it's like, you know what? If I do have a belief, which I do have a belief that, I give gratitude to God and glorify his name every chance I get, then this happened for a reason and a purpose, which I don't understand now. But you know what? One day I will, but all I need to do now is show gratitude, and that's how we're getting through this.
Final quote is, those who have the humility to prepare also have the confidence to perform when the moment arrives.
That's the one I really hang a hat on, because I think, and I find a lot of the young people that I talk to now, because one of my missions is to share my wisdom and all these people's wisdoms with the next generations. Because the last thing my mentor told me in 1997 in April before he passed away was, do not let this die with you. So this is one of my big missions. So I tell the kids that they think there's an easy path to be able to get what they want. People are seeing make millions of dollars on TikTok, doing TikTok stuff, right? And all of a sudden it goes boop, right? Because they're not preparing. Zig Ziglar was the guy I modeled. Now, people who don't know who Zig Ziglar was Tony Robbins before Tony Robbins, right? He was the man. And I basically use that model as he did 70 events before he took $1. He wanted to practice this technique and perfect his performance. He had the humility to do that. So when it came time to perform, he had confidence. See, all those moments, and that's why my first book that I wrote by myself was called Moments Matter, because what I realized, all these moments in our life are there for a reason and purpose, to get us ready for that moment. And that's the preparation, right? In that moment, I had to have the confidence to execute, because I knew nothing. I had to manage a door where the flight attendant was already gone. She got injured. So I knew I had no training on how to handle a plane crash, no training on how to handle a door, no training. But you learn when you have that confidence, you give people certainty, and the person in the most certainty in uncertain times is the person people will look to for leadership.
My friend, we wrap every single conversation with what we call the Live Inspired 7. So there's 7 questions that tether all of our great heroes together into one big, long conversation. So buckle up. Put your mask on yourself first before you help those around you. And here comes question number 1.
Take care of yourself first. Right.
What's the best or the most impactful book you've ever read?
The Fourth Turning.
Tell me about it.
It's from Howe and Strauss. Tony gave me this book years ago. It's about how to really predict, in anticipation of what's going to happen in the future. And basically, the book it goes every 4th generation. You got to get your 4 seasons, right? And in every 4th generation, basically repeats itself through history on what happens. So if you look back, I was born in 1961. Look, 4 generations before, roughly, what's that, 80 to 100 years, right? What was going on in the late 80s, 1880s? Industrial boom. What was happening in the 60s? Industrial boom. What happened in 1895? Spanish-American War. What was happening in Vietnam? So that was the most impactful book, because when I read that book, I blew my mind. I'm like, so I could actually anticipate. And the key skill I tell people leaders are looking for right now is somebody who can anticipate, see things before things are happening.
What's one positive characteristic or one trait you possessed as a little kid growing up outside of Cincinnati that you wish you exhibited today?
Wow. Unbridled confidence to be able to do anything I want. I still think I can do that now, but back when I was a kid, I was bulletproof. I was Superman.
If your home caught fire and all living things are out, you have an opportunity of running in and grabbing one item. What's the one thing you would grab from that burning house?
All the family's out, right?
Family's out, dogs are out.
So everybody's out. I would go back and get my locked box because it's got the urns of my mother and father in it.
Wow. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone, living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
I've had that question before. And, I go back and forth between 2 people, but I would probably say Ronald Reagan. because he was always optimistic. He was a great communicator and led when people were down. He gave people inspiration.
You said two people, so who's the other person?
Abraham Lincoln, because he was the great leader, and one of the greatest traits he taught. And in fact, I'm going to be writing about this here shortly. Is the one of the traits that he had, and you go back to even Winston Churchill. Great leaders all have this, is they're always positive in public. I mean, he always went out as positive. So great leaders always positive. I would love to have a conversation with Lincoln. How do you stay positive when you've got hundreds of thousands of your people dying right now?
What's the best advice Lincoln, Reagan, mom, dad, or anyone else ever gave you?
Never give up. Never give up. My mother taught me that, and I've heard that from many other people. So many people get to the 5-yard line, right? I mean, and I've been there too. I get to the 5-yard line, and I quit. But you figure out, like when we're an entrepreneur, you just keep going. You only fail when you quit. So there's no quit.
What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Crap's going to happen. Let it roll off your back. Because I was so intense at 20. I was totally intense at 20.
Dave Sanderson, the last man off the plane during the miracle on the Hudson. It has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
I have the chance to fulfill the mission that I was put on this earth to do.
Dave, you have embraced the chance to fulfill the mission that you've been placed on this earth to do. You've done it well. You've done it with humility, and I appreciate you sharing it well with us today.
I'm honored, John, to be with you, and best of luck to you and what's going on in your life. I'm excited to watch what happens.
My friend, you're listening to the story and the wisdom of my buddy Dave Sanderson. My name is John O'Leary. Today is our day. What a gift it is. Live inspired. Well, family, I told you before we left the gate and took flight during the podcast that you were going to love our guest. I think he was incredible in the conversation. I had a ton of takeaways, but I guess my favorite is this. Like, preparation builds confidence. It's a big deal. That every setback in our life carries seeds of purpose to fuel the next right step. That's incredible. And that even our hardest moments can shape us into who we are meant to become next. Whew. When I think about those three things being lived out in the life of one of the guests we've had on this podcast in a profoundly meaningful, significant way, I think first and foremost of my friend. Her name is Kechi Akwuchi. Kechi is an America's Got Talent finalist. She's incredible. She survived a devastating plane crash at age 16 and endured third-degree burns on more than 65% of her body. Like Dave Sanderson, her story is a powerful reminder that what happens to us does not get to define us, and that faith, perseverance, and purpose can carry us through the hardest moments in life. In a career of interviewing some of the most remarkable people in the world, I can't think of anyone who inspires me more than Kechi. So that's high praise. If you want to listen to this conversation and be moved like I was when I heard it the first time, check it out. It's episode 466. Or you can just cruise on over to the website right now. That channel is found at johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. In the show notes for today's episode, we'll have a link into Kechi's episode 466. If you are not yet subscribed to the podcast, wherever you're tuned into this episode, just subscribe right now. That ensures then that every future podcast drops into your lap. You'll want it. Trust me, we got a great lineup coming up. You won't want to miss a single one. So family and friends, I want to thank you for tuning into this week's episode. And until next, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire. Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son, Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.